I found out my sister is actually my mother at 25 and I don't know what to do. I found out by accident. That's the part that keeps replaying in my head. If I hadn't opened that drawer, if I hadn't been looking for something as stupid and ordinary as a passport, I might have gone my whole life without knowing. For 25 years, I believed I knew exactly who I was. I knew who my parents were, where I was born, and how our family fit together. We weren't perfect, but we were normal, or at least normal enough that I never questioned anything. My mom was strict but caring. My dad was quiet and worked most of the time. And my older sister, well, she was just my sister. Loud, stubborn, sometimes protective, sometimes distant, the usual sibling stuff. Nothing ever felt off enough to make me suspicious. No dramatic fights. No whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. No obvious signs that something was wrong. If there were secrets in my family, they were buried so deep that even now it scares me to think about how easily everyone carried on like nothing was hidden. The weird thing is, looking back, there were moments, tiny ones. The kind you brush off at the time, but that come back later and make your stomach twist. Like how my sister never called our parents mom and dad the way I did. She usually used their names or avoided calling them anything at all. I remember asking her about it once when I was a kid, and she just shrugged and said, "I'm used to it this way at the time. It didn't seem like a big deal." Or how relatives sometimes gave me this strange look, not pity exactly, but something close to it, before quickly smiling and asking me about school. I always assumed I was imagining it, and then there were the arguments. Not often, but sometimes late at night I'd hear my mom and sister fighting in the kitchen. Not yelling exactly, more like sharp whispers that somehow sounded worse. I could never make out the words clearly, but I remember hearing my sister say things like, "You can't keep pretending forever," and once, "They deserve to know." Back then, I assumed it was about money or jobs or some adult problem I didn't understand. Kids are good at accepting incomplete explanations. If no one tells you something is wrong, you assume everything is fine. So I grew up believing a story that, as it turns out, wasn't mine. I believed I was the youngest child in the family. I believed my sister was just my sister. I believed my parents had me later in life. And for 25 years, nobody corrected me. Not my parents, not my sister, not my relatives, no one. Which is why the discovery felt less like learning something new and more like the ground underneath my entire life suddenly collapsing. Because when you find out that the people you trusted most have been lying to you since the day you were born, it doesn't just change one detail, it changes everything. The worst part isn't even the lie itself, it's how natural it all seemed. The birthday parties, the family photos, the holidays, all of it built on a story that everyone knew was fake except me. And the truth was sitting there the whole time, folded neatly inside a drawer, printed in black ink on a piece of paper that I was never supposed to see. I didn't go looking for answers. I was just trying to find my passport. Instead, I found my birth certificate. And according to that document, the woman I had called my sister my entire life wasn't my sister at all. I grew up in a small, very close-knit family where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. My parents always described us as simple people, the kind who valued family above everything else. That phrase, family above everything, was repeated so often that it practically became a rule in our house. If there was an argument, you forgave. If someone made a mistake, you covered for them. If something painful happened, you kept it inside the family. At the time, I thought that was normal. My dad worked long hours and wasn't around much during the day, but he had this quiet presence that filled the house when he was home. He wasn't the kind of father who talked a lot or shared his feelings. Instead, he showed care in practical ways, fixing things, bringing home snacks he knew I liked, reminding me to lock the doors at night. He treated me like I was fragile in a way I never really understood. Even when I got older, he still checked on me more than he did with my sister. My mom, on the other hand, was the center of everything. She knew where everything was, who needed what, and what was happening at all times. If I was sick, she'd sit beside me for hours. If I had exams, she'd make sure the house stayed quiet. She could be strict, but it always felt like it came from love, or at least that's what I believed. Then there was my sister, the person I thought I understood best. She's about 16 years older than me, which meant she always felt more like a third parent than a sibling. By the time I was old enough to remember things clearly, she was already an adult. She had her own friends, her own life, and eventually her own job. When I was little, she sometimes picked me up from school or helped me with homework, but she was inconsistent in a way I couldn't quite explain. Some days she was warm and protective, buying me snacks and asking about my day. Other days she seemed distant, like she was forcing herself to be around me. As a kid, I assumed that's just how older siblings were. But there were small things that stood out. She almost never showed affection in front of other family members. If she gave me a hug, it was usually when no one else was around. And sometimes I'd catch her staring at me in this strange, thoughtful way, not unfriendly, just heavy, like she was thinking about something she couldn't say. Family gatherings were always a big deal in our house. Birthdays, holidays, random dinners, there was always an excuse to bring everyone together. I remember sitting with my cousins while the adults talked late into the night. Sometimes the conversations would get quiet when I walked into the room, but I assumed they were just talking about boring adult topics. Once, when I was about 10, one of my older cousins joked, "You look just like your sister." Everyone at the table went quiet in a way that felt sudden and unnatural. My mom quickly laughed it off and said, "Of course they do, they're siblings." At the time, I remember feeling oddly proud. I looked up to my sister, and being compared to her felt like a compliment. Now that memory makes my stomach turn. Growing up, I never questioned why my sister seemed so different from me in the family dynamic. She argued with my parents more. She kept her distance. Sometimes she disappeared for days without much explanation. When she did come over, my mom would insist she stay for dinner, and my dad would try a little too hard to make conversation. It felt like there was always some tension in the air when she was around, like everyone was carefully stepping around an invisible crack in the floor. But if you grow up around tension long enough, you stop noticing it. To me, she was just my sister. My parents were just my parents, and this was just my family. There was never a moment where someone sat me down and explained anything. There was no big secret revealed in whispers, no dramatic confession. Just years and years of ordinary life stacked on top of something I was never meant to uncover. And because nothing looked obviously broken, I never thought to look for the cracks. The day I found out started like one of the most ordinary days you can imagine, the kind of day that feels so normal it barely registers as a memory. That's part of what makes it so unsettling now. There was no dramatic buildup, no gut feeling that something was wrong. If anything, I was thinking about the most boring, practical problem possible: paperwork. I needed my passport for a job application. The deadline was coming up, and I'd been putting it off for weeks. My mom was out visiting a relative, and my dad was at work, so I figured it was the perfect time to look for it without having to ask anyone where it was. Usually, if I needed any important document, my mom would just reach into that old wooden cabinet in their bedroom and pull it out like magic. She always knew exactly where everything was. That cabinet had been there my whole life, same scratched surface, same slightly crooked handle on the bottom drawer. It wasn't locked or hidden or anything dramatic like that. Just an ordinary piece of furniture filled with ordinary things: warranties, school certificates, old photos, bills from years ago. I must have opened it dozens of times before to grab random things, and nothing about it had ever felt secret. I started with the top drawer: old envelopes, plastic folders, a bunch of documents stacked neatly but not labeled. No passport. The second drawer had photo albums and greeting cards. Still nothing by the time I got to the bottom drawer. I was already a little annoyed. It was more cluttered than the others, with loose papers and folders overlapping each other. I remember thinking I'd probably have to ask my mom after all. That's when I found the envelope. It was a plain brown envelope, slightly folded at the corner, with my name written on it in blue ink. Just my name, nothing else. No label, no date, no explanation. I almost didn't open it. I assumed it was probably something boring, like an old-school document or a vaccination record. But since it had my name on it, I figured I might as well check. Inside were a few official-looking papers, folded neatly in half. The first one I pulled out was my birth certificate. At first, nothing seemed unusual. My name was there, spelled correctly. My date of birth was right. The hospital name matched what I'd always been told. It looked like the same document I'd seen before when filling out forms. But then I noticed the name listed under mother. I frowned, thinking maybe I was misreading it. It wasn't my mom's name. Not the name I'd written on every school form, every application, every official document my entire life. Instead, it was my sister's name. I remember staring at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. My first thought wasn't that it was true. It was that it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone had filled it out wrong. Maybe it was a different document that got mixed in by accident. Maybe there was some kind of clerical error. I even laughed a little to myself, like it was some weird coincidence. But then I checked again. My name, my birthday. My place of birth, everything matched. Except for the mother's name, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. My hands actually started shaking a little as I looked for the father's name, almost hoping that would clear things up somehow. It didn't. The father's name was someone I had never heard of before. Not my dad, not anyone I recognized, just a completely unfamiliar name printed in the same official black ink. I remember sitting down on the edge of my parents' bed because suddenly my legs didn't feel steady. The room felt strangely quiet, like all the normal background sounds had disappeared. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. I kept staring at the paper, hoping my brain would rearrange the letters into something that made sense. It didn't. Then I checked the envelope again, thinking maybe there was another version of the certificate, a corrected one, maybe, but there wasn't. Just copies of the same document. That's when the realization started creeping in, slow and cold. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't someone else's document. This wasn't an accident. This was my birth certificate. And according to it, the woman I had called my sister my entire life was actually my mother. I must have read it at least 10 times, like repetition might somehow change the words. But they stayed exactly the same, printed clearly and officially, like a fact that had been waiting 25 years for me to notice it. The strangest part is that even then, sitting there with proof in my hands, part of me still didn't believe it. Because if it was true, it meant that everyone in my life, my parents, my sister, my relatives, had known something about me that I didn't. And not one of them had ever said a word. For a long time, maybe minutes, maybe an hour, I just sat there on the edge of the bed holding the birth certificate, staring at the names like they might rearrange themselves into something familiar if I look long enough. My brain kept trying to come up with reasonable explanations, anything that would make this less impossible. Maybe it was an adoption thing. Maybe my sister had signed some paperwork for legal reasons. Maybe my parents had changed something officially, but never updated the records. Every explanation sounded weak even inside my own head. I folded the paper carefully and put it back into the envelope, then took it out again almost immediately. I checked the names one more time, running my finger under the lines like I was verifying a math problem. The ink didn't blur. The words didn't change. I took out my phone and opened our family photo album, years of birthdays, holidays, random pictures taken at home. I scrolled back further and further, past recent photos, past my teenage years, until I reached the oldest ones. There was one picture of my mom holding me as a baby. I'd seen it hundreds of times before. It used to be proof of something simple, that she was my mother, but now I noticed something strange. She looked older than I expected, tired, not in the way new mothers usually look, more like someone who had already raised kids before. I don't know how else to describe it, and standing next to her in the photo was my sister, looking incredibly young. Too young to just be the older sibling helping out. I switched to another photo, then another. In almost every picture from my early childhood, my sister was there. Not just in the background, close, watching, standing beside me. sometimes looking directly at me in a way that suddenly felt too intense for just a sibling. The memories started coming back differently, like scenes from a movie after you learn the twist ending. Her picking me up and holding me when I cried, her arguing with my mom in hushed voices, her disappearing for long stretches of time and coming back quiet and withdrawn. The way relatives sometimes looked at the two of us, then quickly looked away. I suddenly remembered being around 7 or 8 years old and asking my mom why she had me so late in life. She'd paused for just a second before answering, "I guess you were a surprise." At the time, that answer satisfied me. Now it felt rehearsed. I kept scrolling until I found a photo from a family gathering. I must have been about 5 years old. I was sitting between my mom and my sister, and one of my aunts had her hand on my shoulder. I remembered that day, or at least, I thought I did. But now another memory surfaced, not clear, just fragments. My aunt leaning down and saying something softly to my mom. My mom shaking her head quickly, my sister looking upset. I had no idea what they were talking about back then. Now I had a guess. My hands were shaking again by the time I locked my phone. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had moved closer while I wasn't paying attention. I stood up and started pacing, the envelope still in my hand. That's when another thought hit me, one that made my stomach drop even more. If this was my real birth certificate, then my parents had seen it. They must have known exactly what it said. This wasn't new information to them. This wasn't some forgotten document. This was something they had kept. For 25 years, not lost, not misplaced. Carefully stored in an envelope with my name written on it. Which meant this wasn't just a secret, it was a decision. They had chosen not to tell me. Every year, every birthday, every milestone. They had watched me grow up calling my mother sister and my grandmother mom, and they had said nothing. I suddenly felt this overwhelming urge to ask someone, anyone, what was going on. I grabbed my phone and opened my sister's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I stopped. What was I even supposed to say? "Hey, are you secretly my mother?" The thought sounded so ridiculous that I almost laughed again, but the sound caught in my throat before it could come out. Instead, I opened our chat history. It was mostly normal stuff, short messages, holiday wishes, occasional check-ins. Nothing unusual, nothing that hinted at a massive, life-changing secret. I clicked on her profile picture. It was a recent photo, just a normal selfie. Same face I'd known my whole life, and suddenly I found myself staring at it, searching for something I'd never looked for before. A resemblance, the shape of the eyes, the line of the nose, the curve of the mouth. Things I had always assumed came from my parents now seemed misplaced, like puzzle pieces forced into the wrong picture. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I looked like her. Not just a little, enough that it made my chest feel tight. I switched to my dad's photo next, then my mom's. For the first time in my life, I noticed how little I resembled either of them. That's when the fear started to creep in underneath the confusion. Because if this part was true, if my sister was really my mother, then there was an even bigger question sitting right there on the birth certificate. The name listed under father, a man I had never heard of. A man no one had ever mentioned. And suddenly the secret felt bigger than just one lie. It felt like an entire missing story. I don't remember deciding to confront them. I think at some point, the need to know just became stronger than the fear of asking. Sitting alone with that envelope felt unbearable, like I was holding a secret that was never meant to exist outside that drawer. The longer I stayed there, the more it felt like the walls were closing in on me. So I waited. I put everything back exactly where I found it, the same drawer, the same stack of papers, the same slightly bent envelope. It felt strangely important that no one knew I had seen it. Like if I disturbed the order too much, the truth might disappear again. Then I went to my room and tried to act normal. I checked my phone, I opened random apps, I even tried watching videos for a while, but I couldn't focus on anything. Every few minutes, my mind drifted back to the same thought. My sister is my mother. It didn't feel real. It felt like something I had imagined, something that would dissolve as soon as someone explained it properly. My mom came home first. I heard the front door open and close, the familiar sound of her setting her bag down on the table. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it. But that day, every sound felt sharp and significant. "Are you home?" she called out. My voice almost didn't work when I answered, "Yeah." I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, opening cabinets, running water, all the normal sounds of a normal day. And that was the strangest part, how normal everything still was. How the world hadn't changed even though mine had. I walked out into the kitchen slowly, like I was approaching something dangerous. She looked up at me and smiled, the same way she always did. "Did you find your passport?" Such a simple question. I don't know why that was the moment everything inside me snapped, but it was. Maybe it was the normalcy of it. Maybe it was the realization that she had probably asked me questions like this thousands of times while keeping the biggest secret of my life hidden. "No," I said, which was technically true. She turned back to what she was doing. "It should be in the cabinet, bottom drawer, maybe." "I'll help you look later. The bottom drawer." My chest tightened. "I already looked," I said. That made her pause, just for a second. It was such a small thing that I might not have noticed it before. But now I was watching carefully, analyzing every movement, every expression. "Oh," she said. "Maybe we moved it somewhere else." I nodded slowly. Then I said the words before I could stop myself. "I found my birth certificate." Her hand stopped moving. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just stopped. And in that tiny moment of stillness, I knew. She turned around slowly, and there was something different in her face now. Not panic exactly, but something close to it. Like someone bracing for impact. "Why were you looking at that?" she asked, not "What did you see?" Not "Is something wrong?" just "Why were you looking?" Because she already knew. "It was in an envelope," I said. With my name on it. She didn't respond. I could actually hear my heartbeat in my ears now, loud and uneven. "The name on it was wrong," I said. Still nothing. "The mother's name," I clarified. "It wasn't yours." That's when the color drained from her face. She sat down slowly at the table, like her legs suddenly couldn't support her anymore. I had never seen her look like that before, smaller somehow, less certain. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then I asked the question that had been building inside me all day. "Why is her name on my birth certificate?" I didn't say my sister. I didn't need to. My mom covered her mouth with her hand, and for a moment I thought she might cry. Instead, she just looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, part fear, part sadness, part something else entirely. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said quietly. And just like that, any tiny hope I had that there was a simple explanation disappeared. Not "That's a mistake," not "Let me explain." Not "It's not what you think," just "You weren't supposed to find that." Something inside me broke a little at those words. "Is it true?" I asked. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. She didn't answer right away. And in that silence, I already knew what she was going to say. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, the word hit harder than I expected. Harder than seeing the paper, harder than imagining it. Because papers can be wrong. People usually aren't. I felt like the room tilted slightly, like my balance had shifted in a way I couldn't correct. "So I started, but the word caught in my throat. I tried again, "So she's my mother." My mom closed her eyes for a moment, and then she nodded. 25 years of certainty collapsed into a single moment. Every memory, every assumption, every simple fact about who I was suddenly felt unstable. But there was still one question left, the one that had been sitting in the back of my mind since I first read that document. "The father," I said slowly. "Who is he?" My mom's eyes snapped open, and the look on her face told me that whatever came next was going to be even worse. It's been 3 weeks since that conversation, and I still don't feel like myself. That sounds dramatic, I know, but it's the only way I can explain it. It's like I've been walking around in someone else's life, pretending everything is normal while this huge crack runs through the middle of it. I go to work, I answer messages, I eat dinner with my parents. From the outside, nothing has changed. But inside, everything feels rearranged. After I asked about the father, my mom shut down completely. I could see it happen in real time, like a door slamming shut behind her eyes. She shook her head and said, "That's not important right now." Not important, like it was a minor detail instead of half of my existence. I pushed, of course. I asked again and again. Each time she gave me the same kind of vague, deflecting answers. It was a long time ago. It doesn't matter anymore. Some things are better left in the past. At one point, I asked if he even knew I existed. She didn't answer that one at all. My sister, I still don't know what to call her in my head, came over the next day. I don't know if my mom told her or if she just sensed something was wrong, but she showed up in the evening looking tense and unusually quiet. We sat in the living room together for a while without talking. It was one of the longest silences I've ever experienced. Every time I looked at her, I felt this strange pull in my chest, like recognition mixed with distance. Finally, I asked her directly, "Why didn't you tell me?" She stared at the floor for a long time before answering. "You had a good life," she said. "We didn't want to ruin that." We, not they, we. That word stuck with me. She told me she was very young when she had me, too young. She said our parents, my grandparents, decided it would be easier if they raised me as their own. She said it like it was the most logical thing in the world, like it was a practical decision instead of something that would reshape an entire person's identity. I asked her if she ever wanted to tell me. She said yes. I asked her why she didn't. She said she was afraid, not of me, of the consequences, of reopening old wounds, of disrupting the family, of changing how I saw her. That part almost made me laugh, because that had already happened. The strangest part is how everyone seems to expect things to just continue. Like now that the truth is out, we can all quietly adjust and move on. My mom still acts like my mom. She asks if I've eaten. She reminds me about appointments. She talks about everyday things like nothing has changed. And my sister, my mother, still acts like my sister. Same tone, same distance, same careful way of speaking to me like she's afraid of saying the wrong thing. No one talks about it unless I bring it up. And even then, the conversations never last long. They drift away into silence or get redirected into safer topics. It feels like they've all agreed, without saying it out loud, that this is something we acknowledge once and then bury again. But I can't bury it. Every time I look at old photos, I see something different now. Every memory feels slightly off, like a story told with the wrong names attached to the characters. I keep thinking about all the times I called her my sister, all the birthdays, all the holidays, all the ordinary moments that now feel staged somehow, like everyone was following a script except me. And then there's the question that still hasn't been answered. The name on that birth certificate. I tried searching it online. Nothing useful came up, just a few random profiles that may or may not be the same person. My mom refuses to talk about him, and my sister says she barely remembers anything. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what parts of the story I'm still missing. That's probably the hardest part, realizing that if they kept this from me for 25 years, there could be other things too. Other details, other truths that everyone knows except me. Trust doesn't break all at once. It cracks slowly, spreading through everything until you're not sure what parts are still solid. I still live in the same house. I still sit at the same table. I still see the same faces every day, but nothing feels the same anymore. Sometimes I catch myself almost saying mom and then hesitating, just for a split second, before the word comes out. And every time it does, it feels heavier than it used to. I haven't told anyone outside the family yet. Not my friends, not my coworkers, no one. Part of me feels like saying it out loud will make it even more real. So for now, I'm just sitting with it, trying to figure out who I am in a story that apparently started long before I knew it existed. And honestly, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do next. Do I keep pretending everything is normal? Do I keep pushing for answers? Do I try to find my father on my own? Or do I just accept that the people I trusted most built my entire life on a secret and somehow learn to live with that? Because right now, I genuinely don't know which option hurts less.